we have been discussing about this pertinent question as to how is philosophy a demanding subject in the global market today. This is a introduction to the background of Introduction to Philosophy, which has been introduced as a paper in the UGC NEP syllabus in our semester 1 on the Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Now, we had just been discussing as to how is philosophy today a demanding subject in the global market. We had just about mentioned that in the field of academia and research, be it in the teaching and higher education, we see the demand in philosophy. So philosophy, please understand, is a skill-intensive discipline that prepares graduates for diverse careers by cultivating critical thinking, ethical reasoning, conceptual clarity, analytical writing, and decision making. Now, in civil services and public administration, civil services India and abroad, be it IAS, IPS, IFS, philosophy comes up as an optional paper. Also, state civil services, policy advisory roles. So, why philosophy helps? Because there's this paper like ethics paper, I think GS4, which definitely comes handy in essay writing, in analytical ability, in interviews. Further, the policy think tanks and governance as policy analyst, research associate, legislative consultant, and some of the employers who have taken up people with a philosophical training are employers like Niti Aayog, UN bodies, World Bank, think tanks like ORF, CPR, Brookings, and so on. Now, in the field of law, justice, and legal reasoning, we see that there is an inherent connection with law and jurisprudence. So, one can very well be a lawyer after LLB and after having done philosophy. Please understand there is a paper called Legal Philosophy in our DU syllabus. So, one is already trained in that line. There is also legal researcher, judicial services aspirant, constitutional analyst. So philosophy's advantage is vis-a-vis papers like logic, ethics, political philosophy, interpretation skills. Now, in the domain of ethics, AI and technological sector, I think AI is everywhere. AI is the only currency that we understand in today's dictum. And AI ethics and responsible technology, we see AI ethics consultant, technology policy analyst, algorithm bias researcher. Employers like tech companies, research labs, international organizations all have an inkling towards philosophically trained minds. And there are certain MNCs that are now coming up with research labs like, say, epistemology labs, not only AI labs. So there is a lot that is happening in the domain of philosophy and why philosophy is so demanding a subject in the global market today, if not before. So the relevant areas, definitely ethics, philosophy of mind, epistemology, logic, and all these are the fast growing global pathways. Now, in business, corporate and management roles, corporate ethics and the ESG roles, we see the corporate ethics officer, the CSR manager, ESG analyst, compliance advisor. The sectors are MNCs, sustainability firms, consulting agencies who hire philosophy trained minds. In consulting and strategy, like management consultant, business analyst, strategy researcher, philosophy graduates excel because they have a structured problem solving, the clear communication and ethical foresight. Media, communication and content. In journalism and media, the journalist, columnist, editorial analyst, news researcher. The content strategy and publishing in academic editor, content strategist, policy writer, publishing consultant. In the social sector and NGOs, we see NGOs and international developments in the form of program officer, ethics and human rights advocate, research coordinator. Employers like Amnesty International's Oxfam, UNESCO, UNICEF, and so on. Psychology, counseling and well-being, we see that of course with additional qualifications, only being a philosophy graduate or philosophically trained will not help, but it will definitely set the ground for you to come up in other fields too, like psychology here, as a counselor, as a therapist, as a mental health advocate. So philosophical areas applied here is philosophy of mind, ethics, existentialism. In the domain of creative and cultural careers like writing, arts and culture, you could be an author, poet, a cultural critic, an art curator. Philosophy enhances, after all, the depth of thought, the interpretative skill, conceptual creativity. In competitive exams and generalist roles, we see UGC, NET, UPSC, judiciary, foreign service exams, and also in corporate and generalist roles, HR, ethics and training, leadership development, organizational culture consultant. Entrepreneurship and independent paths, independent thinker roles like ethics consultancy, educational startups, public intellectual speaker, or online course creator. So in the PPT which is being shown here, we see that the skills philosophy graduates bring are critical thinking, which is very, very high, the market value. Ethical reasoning is it's very high. Logical analysis, high. Writing and communication, high. Adaptability, very high. And skill, of course, the market value, which we have just discussed. So the common myth so far has been that philosophy has no jobs. Philosophy opens multiple pathways, not a single job track. And it is only for teaching, or teaching is just one amongst many options. So please understand that philosophy has no jobs is a myth. Philosophy opens multiple pathways, not a single job track. And if philosophy is only for teaching, not at all. Teaching is just one amongst the many options. So philosophy does not train you for a single profession. It trains you to enter, shape, and ethically navigate multiple professions. In a volatile global economy, this intellectual flexibility is not a disadvantage, it is a strategic strength. Now, philosophy. What is philosophy? Let us try to get some insights of it. Philosophy is also called as darshana, anvikshiki, tattva. Now, philosophy, Greek term love of wisdom, and the core meaning is something where philosophy is the disciplined, critical and reflective inquiry into the most fundamental questions about reality, knowledge, value, reason and meaning. And this part, when we are discussing, we are slowly entering into the structured syllabus of Introduction to Philosophy, Semester 1, which has been introduced as a part of the UGCF and EP 2020 in our Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi. And the first theme here is about philosophy, darshan, and vikshiki tattva. Here we start with the core structured syllabus of the paper. So, the key features of philosophy firstly is rational inquiry. It uses arguments, analysis and justification rather than authority alone. Number 2, foundational concern. It asks question prior to and beneath the sciences. What is real? What can we know? What should we do? Number 3, normative and critical. It evaluates beliefs, concepts and practices. So it is also systematic yet open-ended. It seeks coherence while remaining revisable. Now, some of the finest classic Western framings in Introduction to Philosophy, of course, there will be Socrates, where philosophy as examination of life and self-knowledge, Plato, ascent from doxa or opinion to knowledge, episteme, Aristotle, science of first causes and principles, Bertrand Russell, philosophy as the attempt to answer ultimate questions where definite answers are not yet available, enlarging the mind. Now, when we come, that was all about the term, the word philosophy. Now we are trying to understand or unpack the closer cousins from the Oriental tradition, which is darshana. Now, darshan is a Sanskrit term which is to do with seeing, vision, insight. Now, this is important. As much as we see, we create, and for that it is important that we go inward. So darshan here just doesn't mean to see things outside, but to see things inside. And when I say inside, there is a popular saying that whatever you see or you think, you ultimately create. So your drishti is your shrishti. So darshan here denotes a way of seeing reality, a lived experiential vision rather than mere speculation. The distinctive emphases are experiential orientation, where knowledge is not only propositional but transformative; soteriological aim, where liberation or moksha or freedom from suffering is there; and integration of theory and practice is where we have ethics, meditation, ritual, and disciplines are integral. Now, the classic Indian darshans are Astika, where Veda is affirmed, like Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, Vedanta; Nastika, where Veda is independent, that is, they do not believe in the authority of the Vedas, like Buddhism, Jainism, Charvaka. And if we try to contrast the term darshan with philosophy, the word philosophy, we see that while Western philosophy often prioritizes argument, darshan emphasizes vision plus verification in life. Truth is something one realizes as much as one proves. We also have this segment called Anvikshiki. So Anvikshiki is yet the other name for philosophy. Just like philosophy is the name, the cousins from the Oriental side have been darshan and Anvikshiki. Let us now try to unpack this term Anvikshiki. Anvikshiki is again a Sanskrit term for critical inquiry, and the core meaning is the science or the art of critical investigation, reasoned analysis. And the historical significance, if we are to see, we find that it is mentioned in the Artha Shastra as one of the 4 branches of learning. It is associated with logic, debate, and rational scrutiny. Now, what are its functions? Its functions is that it tests belief through argument and counter-argument. It guards against dogmatism by insisting on reasons and evidence. It bridges philosophy and logic, especially in Nyaya. And in relation to philosophy, we find that Anvikshiki is philosophy's methodological backbone in the Indian tradition. It ensures that darshan is not blind faith but examined vision. So this is important. So it is just not faith, blind, but vision, and that is examined. Further, there is also this term called tattva. Now, tattva in Sanskrit, basically, if I am to translate it, it would be something like thatness, or in principle or reality. So, the core meaning is the fundamental constituents or principles of reality, uses across schools like ontological, what truly exists, I think 25 tattvas in Sankhya. Epistemic could be what must be known for liberation. Metaphysical is categories of being, self, matter, causation, and philosophical role is naming tattvas is an attempt to map reality. So disagreements about tattva distinguishes schools. So if we focus on this PPT here, we see that the skills philosophy graduates bring and the aspects of philosophy, darshan, anvikshiki, and tattva. If we are to focus them now, we see that the primary focus philosophy would be wisdom through reason, darshan would be vision of reality, anvikshiki is all about critical inquiry, and tattva is ultimate principles. The method philosophy is basically argument analysis, darshan is insight plus practice, anvikshiki is logic debate, tattva is ontological mapping. And the aim, philosophy is understanding, critique, darshan is liberation, realization, and vikshiki is truth testing, and tattva is knowing reality. So, philosophy, when viewed globally, is not merely abstract speculation. In the Indian tradition, it unfolds a vision, darshana, disciplined by inquiry and vikshiki towards the understanding of reality, tattva. So, they are all they are like threads in this weave called philosophy. So, these are all entangled, beautifully interconnected, intertwined with each other. So, as much as darshan gives us the vision, and vikshike is the module or the methodology which is disciplined by inquiry, and inquiry towards what? Towards understanding the reality, which is tattva. So, philosophy is darshan, is and vikshike is tattva. So, while in the Western tradition, it often foregrounds argument and conceptual clarity. So, together they reveal philosophy as both a way of thinking and a way of being. Now, in the PPT that is being displayed here, we will try to unpack some of the more details aspects of darshan and vikshiki and tattva philosophy. Now, etymology, we see darshan is from drish, to see, and vikshiki from anu plus iksh, which is to critically examine. Tattva is from tat or thatness, and philosophy, of course, as we understand, from Greek philosophy or Sophia. The literal meaning, darshan is all about vision, insight, and vikshiki, rational inquiry. Tattva, ultimate reality, principle, philosophy, love of wisdom. Primary orientation, darshan is all about experiential, spiritual, and vikshiki, analytical, rational, tattva, ontological, philosophy in Western term, theoretical, critical. The core aim of darshan is liberation or moksha, and vikshiki, knowledge through inquiry, tattva, understanding reality, philosophy, wisdom and truth. Method, for the first it is intuition, meditation, reason. Anvikshiki, logic, debate, inference. Tattva, metaphysical reflection. Western or philosophy in the West, argument, analysis. Nature of knowledge, darshan, transformative, anvikshiki, critical and discursive. Tattva, foundational, philosophy, Western term, conceptual. Relation to life, darshan is directly lived, anvikshiki, reflective practice, tattva, underlying structure, philosophy, often theoretical. Epistemic focus, darshan, seeing truth, anvikshiki, examining claims, tattva, what truly is, philosophy, nature of knowledge. Ontological concern, darshan, reality as experienced, anvikshiki, reality as analyzed, tattva, ultimate being, philosophy, being and existence. Ethical orientation, darshan, integral to liberation, anvikshiki, normative reasoning, tattva, value embedded, philosophy, moral philosophy. Soteriological role, darshan central, anvikshiki secondary, tattva implicit, philosophy in Western term often absent. Tradition, darshan is the Indian philosophical systems, anvikshiki classical Indian inquiry, especially nyaya, tattva pan-Indian metaphysics, philosophy in Western term Greek Western lineage. Relation to religion, non-theistic or trans-theistic, anvikshiki, independent of ritual, tattva, beyond ritual, philosophy in Western term, mostly secular. Use of logic, darshan, supportive, anvikshiki, central. Logic is central in anvikshiki. Tattva, limited, philosophy in Western time is also central. We also have certain schools associated, like in darshan we have Vedanta, yoga, Buddhism. In anvikshiki there is nyaya, vaisheshika. In tattva, sankhya, vedanta. And philosophy in Western times, of course, Plato, Aristotle, Kant, I mean, you just name it. View of self, darshan is self as realized, anvikshiki self as knower, tattva self as principle, and philosophy in Western terms is self as a problem. Language use, darshan is symbolic, aphoristic, anvikshiki is precise, technical, tattva abstract, and philosophy in Western term is analytical. We also have the debate culture, where darshan, here it is limited, anvikshiki highly developed, tattva minimal, philosophy in Western term central. Practical outcome about liberation, darshan is all about liberation, anvikshiki is about right knowledge, tattva is about truth realization, and the last one is about intellectual clarity. We also have the role of experience. Darshan is primary, role of experience in anvikshiki is secondary. For tattva, it is interpretive, and for philosophy in the Western term, it is often secondary. Further, also to approach to truth, if we are to see, we see that in darshan it is to be seen, anvikshiki is to be tested, tattva is to be understood. Philosophy in the Western term is to be justified. The pedagogical style in darshan, it is the guru sishya, in anvikshiki it is the debate and dialogue, tattva it is reflection. And philosophy in the Western term, of course, lecture and argument. Scope, darshan is holistic, anvikshiki methodological, tattva metaphysics, and the last broad and diverse. Further, about the attitude to doubt, darshan is transcendent, anvikshiki encouraged, tattva clarifies, and philosophy it is doubt is central. Relation to science, we see integrative for darshana, and science anvikshiki is proto-scientific, tattva is foundational, and philosophy in Western term it is analytical. Now the view of the world for darshan, it is meaningful and ordered. Anvikshiki, it is object of inquiry. Tattva, it is manifestations of principles, and philosophy in the Western term it is problematic. We also have the goal of inquiry, where for darshan, wisdom as liberation, anvikshiki as valid cognition, tattva as ontological clarity, and philosophy in Western term it is rational understanding. And about human ideal, darshan will talk about jnani or siddha, anvikshiki will talk about rational inquirer, tattva is all about knower of reality, and philosophy, of course in the Western term, it's all about the philosopher. Contemporary relevance, darshan it's spiritual and ethical, anvikshiki logic, AI law, tattva consciousness studies, philosophy in Western terms, academia and policy. And lastly, the aspect of overall character, if we are to check, we see in darshan it is vision centered, anvikshiki reason centered, tattva reality centered, and philosophy from the Western term it is wisdom centered. So classifications of philosophy, or the detailed expositions of some of the prescribed readings would also help us to understand the various bifurcations of the aspects that we have done right now with philosophy from the Western terminology to darshan to anvikshiki to tattva. And some of the suggested readings are A. Moore and Bruder's Philosophy, The Power of Ideas, published in 2010, where the reading would be, what is philosophy and divisions of philosophy, and it is also one of the prescribed readings where one tries to understand what is philosophy, and Moore and Bruder introduces philosophy as a reflective, critical and rational enterprise concerned with questions that are fundamental, general, unavoidable. It is also interesting that they emphasize that philosophy is not defined by a single method or set of answers, but by a style of questioning. So philosophical questions differ from empirical questions because they often cannot be settled solely by observation. They require conceptual clarification and they involve normative evaluation. Thus, philosophy sharpens our thinking by exposing hidden assumptions and clarifying concepts. Even when it does not yield final answers, it deepens understanding and intellectual humility. Also, in this very essential reading of Moore and Bruder, we see that they present the standard Western classification of philosophy, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, logic, aesthetics, social and political philosophy as the classifications. Now, these various classifications as to metaphysics, for example, we see that it is the study of reality as a whole, where questions of being, substance, causation, self, God, freedom, and to give an example, they might just ask what is ultimately real, matter, mind, or both. Epistemology, theory of knowledge, nature, sources, limits, and validity of knowledge. Example, what distinguishes knowledge from belief. Ethics or moral philosophy, study of value and conduct like good, right, duty, virtue, justice. The example is what makes an action morally right. The logic would be the study of correct reasoning, argument forms, validity, fallacies, logic as a tool of philosophy, not merely a branch. Aesthetics is philosophy of beauty and art, nature of beauty, artistic expression, aesthetic experience. Social and political philosophy, justice, rights, authority, state. And we see that these classifications shows philosophy as both theoretical like metaphysics, epistemology, and practical like ethics, political philosophy, unified by a rational inquiry. We also see that there are few more readings besides the one that we have just discussed about Moore and Bruder on philosophy, the power of ideas, which is published sometime in 2010. There is also Bertrand Russell's work on the history of Western philosophy and introduction. There is also Ramakrishna Puligandla's work on fundamentals of Indian philosophy, and or as of that matter, D. Kautilya's Arthashastra. And please understand, these are essential readings and they ought to be read in depth. So far that we have just about discussed is we have given an introduction as to what is philosophy. We have checked how philosophy from the Western terms is distinct from darshan, it is distinct from anvikshiki, it is distinct from tattva, and we have just about managed to read one of the essential readings about Moore and Bruder. We will be continuing more of these essential readings in our further classes. Thank you so much.